Thank you for joining us. I would like to welcome you and everybody else on this video call on behalf of Technion UK to this week's webinar. We are currently running weekly webinars, and today we are broadcasting to nearly 400 people around the world. This event is in conjunction with Stanmore United Synagogue, and we'd like to thank Rabbi Fine, with whom we had a great relationship. This webinar is also supported by the Embassy of Israel, who will speak at the end. My name is Oscar Menzer, and I am a graduate of the Technion from 1994, which for me just seems like yesterday, but it's been a few years by now. And I've just been elected to the Board of Trustees of Technion UK, for which I'm very grateful and excited to be part of. In this event, we are also celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Russian Aliyah, with amazing contributions to science and technology in Israel and around the world. And it's a real pleasure for me to welcome Michael and Alex, who I read about personally for the first time in the Times here in London several years ago now. Twins who wrote a computer program to do what no other human could do around them, which is to differentiate between them. It struck me immediately, this is one of the grand accomplishments of humanity, on the same level of beating the world #1 chess player, and afterwards, of course, beating the #1 Go player. One of the key challenges we are all struggling with is to tell twins apart. And the machine could do it, and 2 Technion students did it in their final year project. So that was, without knowing anything else about it, just reading about that in the newspapers back then, was a extremely memorable event for humanity for me. So a special pleasure to have Alex and Michael here. Of course, on top of that, after that, incredible academic and commercial successes that would take way too long to go into right now, pioneering the idea of science of face recognition, AI, the use of computers to do what computers may have a hard time doing, which is typically in the human realm. And these are just examples of the incredible talent that continues to come out of the Technion, of course, which makes us very proud to represent here in the UK. Michael is currently the chair in machine learning at Imperial College, and Alex is the vice dean of computer science at the Technion. So Technion UK is delighted that you have joined us for an intimate and private conversation between these 2 amazing brothers, Michael, who is in London, and Alex in Haifa. And please do keep the questions coming. We are expecting lots of exciting questions from everybody. And I'm going to do my absolute best to select the questions and forward them on and bring them forward on this video. So without further ado, please, Alex, Michael, we are excited to see your presentation.
Thank you. So I think, thank you very much, Oscar. It's a really great pleasure to be here. So maybe before I start, and I wanted to show a couple of slides. I think that's how we used to basically to engage in the academic world. I see a question that somebody is asking that I drink my tea with the left hand and Alex with the right one. So that's really an anomaly, I would say, between identical twins. To the best of my knowledge, I'm left-handed and he's right-handed.
So I just want to complete Michael's comment on that. So we once attended a talk about, I think I don't remember if a genetist or an MD who was claiming that left or right-handedness was an inherited property. And at some point after the lecture, we came to him and we said that we are a living counterexample, because I'm right-handed and Michael is left-handed, and he couldn't believe it actually. So I think these cases do exist. So At least
probably it's wrong conjecture. So let me maybe share my screen, and then yeah, I wanted to. I don't know if you can see it properly. So I would actually like. It's a little bit weird to talk about old stuff, which is well almost 20 years old now. The project that Oscar mentioned, but I should say that we're still undergraduate students towards the completion of our undergraduate degree at the Technion around 2000 and maybe 2001. And basically we came across Professor Ron Kimmel, who was then, I think he was just recently joined the computer science faculty at that time, and who later became our advisor and collaborator and lifelong friend, I should say. And basically had this cool problem of how to look at face recognition as a three-dimensional geometric problem. And maybe nowadays face recognition is completely common and ubiquitous, but if you go 20 years back, basically this is the problem from the domain of computer vision. Computer vision didn't really work. Nowadays we are used to this idea that you have self-driving cars and your phone recognizes you and whatnot, but it was completely not obvious around that time. And if you look at this example, so face recognition, basically the way that it was addressed is looking at a picture, a two-dimensional picture that is captured by a camera. I should say that even digital cameras around that time were pretty exotic. You just remember how your cell phone looked like 20 years ago. And basically we studied what parts of identity are hidden in the geometric structure of the face versus the texture, what we see in a two-dimensional picture. And we could see that the two-dimensional face recognition systems could be easily fooled by changing the texture. So if you make up your face in some ideal way, well, in computer graphics, we call this texture mapping, you can disguise yourself as a completely different person. And our conjecture was that three-dimensional structure is more reliable in identifying the person. One of the problems was obviously how to represent this three-dimensional geometry. And it was really cool geometric problem. I don't want to go into details that are probably too technical, but it has to do with how we make maps, how we take something that is that has curvature like the globe, and try to flatten it into Euclidean space, into the plane. And we try to apply similar approaches for face recognition. So here you can see, well, this is really antique nowadays when I'm looking at these pictures. So that's a user interface from face recognition application that we developed at that time. And basically capturing the 3D structure of the face was also not obvious. You couldn't find an off-the-shelf 3D sensor around that time. So 20 years ago, we had to develop it ourselves. And around the time you can buy a 3D scanner for the cost of a new car, maybe. So it was really expensive, very large. And we tried to commercialize this idea. It sounded very cool. Face recognition, also relatively accurate. We could distinguish between ourselves. So this is what the media liked. And well, Oscar mentioned that it appeared even in the Times. So we had interviews with CNN and other media. So we had our short 5 minutes of glory. And it sounded like a cool commercial idea, but I would say that the investors were pretty skeptical, and they were saying that basically you don't have 3D sensors. How would you be using these algorithms? And I would say in retrospective, we of course were stubborn, saying, how come we have the best technology ever? And it is very accurate. It's better than anything that exists. Why you don't want to give us money to develop it into a commercial application? I think in retrospective, well, nowadays also speaking as somebody who we invest ourselves in technological companies, I think they were completely right. Basically, this was premature. There was no market for it. But things have changed quite rapidly. So if you might remember this movie Minority Report, that's also almost 20 years ago now. You probably remember this memorable scene where Tom Cruise was manipulating this very sophisticated user interface of a futuristic computer from the 2050s with his hands. And this idea of controlling your computer, interfacing with computer with hand gestures, was realized first by Microsoft, the now famous Microsoft Kinect, which was basically an active sensor that was placed in your living room and allowed you to interface and control games, the Microsoft Xbox, with the motion of your hands and your body. So at that point, we thought that the market is already ready with 3D sensors, at least starting to appear on the market, is ready for 3D face recognition. But it appeared after some analysis, well, ironically, that actually face recognition is the less interesting application, but the sensor itself is much more interesting. And here again, this is also, if sometimes in research or in the development project, we have an eureka moment. So this is from roughly 2011, I think, where we have a first working FPGA prototype of a 3D sensor, and you can see Alex that is drawing something with his finger. So again, around that time, that was almost unthinkable to do with two-dimensional image. And that was actually technology that was licensed by a company called Envision that in 2012 was acquired by Intel, and that's how both of us ended up at Intel, working on basically developing this project and bringing it from a prototype and from a concept to a commercial product that, of course, involves a lot of technical and engineering difficulties. Basically, you need to mass manufacture something like this at a small cost. And it was announced as RealSense technology, so that's how Intel branded it at CES by the then CEO, Brian Kazanich. And basically now it's a commercially successful product with multiple millions of units shipped, several generations, several versions, and it enables a lot of cool.
We just got a comment that the sound is breaking up.
Yeah, so the sound is
maybe
probably.
You could just make sure that you're well connected there. Just repeat maybe the last few seconds.
Sure. So basically, what you could see in this video, I hope you could see it, is an example of what is called a markerless motion capture. So motion capture is a technology that is used by for movie production in Hollywood to do movies like Avatar. It is extremely expensive, extremely complex that is large as a room, and it costs probably close to $1 million a day to run it. So with markerless motion capture, basically it's based on just simple 3D sensor that is placed in front of the face of the actor. And here you can see that the facial expressions, the motion of the actor is transferred in real time to this animated Shrek-like character. And that was technology developed by a Swiss company called FaceShift, actually colleagues based in Lausanne. And it was acquired by Apple in 2015. Here, actually, they're using one of the early prototypes of Intel RealSense, the sensor that we developed at Intel. So if you ever used an emoji in Apple, that's the technology that comes from FaceShift. I actually have here one of the newer generations of Intel RealSense. So I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I will move closer to the camera. So this is actually a new cool thing that we developed at Intel in the past.
I have the old one.
Yeah, Alex has the old one. We are thinking this. Yeah. So I have the micro light, and Alex has the structured light camera. So these are several generations that became successful commercial technology. I should say that basically nowadays, with the advent of deep learning, something that was impossible or inconceivable a decade ago is already possible. So one of the things that, for example, in order to build this three-dimensional avatar or three-dimensional version of yourself, your face, your hands, your body, you needed a three-dimensional scanner input. Nowadays, you can do it from two-dimensional video input. And this is a company, well, I cannot take any credit for this. So I have one of my PhD students that is part of it, and my good friends and colleagues that have developed this technology. Alex and I have helped them a little bit as investors. And basically, this is very cool technology. That's something that we needed 3D sensors 10 years ago, and that was basically the main concept of Envision. Nowadays is possible with deep learning without any 3D input. And one of the breakthroughs that behind this and similar applications is deep learning, as I mentioned. So basically, it's a field of machine learning that is based on artificial neural networks. And with my group of students, we developed what we call geometric deep learning. So basically, it's generalization of neural network architectures to geometric data, such as 3D shapes, shape of our body. And we currently have state-of-the-art results for example, generating 3D models of bodies and hands and faces from different types of input, whether it's 3D input, point clouds, meshes, or even two-dimensional video, as you've seen in the example before. And I was at Harvard for my sabbatical year around, well, it was around 2017, and everybody was talking about social media. It was the Cambridge Analytica scandal that shook Facebook to the bones, and everybody was talking about fake news. And if you think of the social network, basically it's a graph. So a graph, in many senses, is very similar to what we deal with in computer graphics and computer vision, the geometric structures. You can do, for example, spectral analysis on graphs, same way as you do it on manifolds. So we wanted to try to employ these methods that we developed for geometric data for network and graph structure data. And if you think of graphs basically as mathematical objects, essentially, it is a very generic concept that can model any system of relations or interactions. So you can model with graphs social networks, you can model physical systems. They appear in particle physics, they appear in biological sciences, in medicine, and so on and so forth. And talking about fake news, there was empirical evidence, and you can see here example, a paper that appeared on the cover of Science in 2018 from the MIT Media Lab, showing that on Twitter, fake news and real news spread differently. And we used geometric deep learning to try to learn these patterns that allow us to distinguish between fake news and real news from the way they spread in a way that is content agnostic. And here you can see an example of Twitter graph and how a piece of news, a story spreads on this graph. So together with my students, I founded a company that we called Fabula. Well, there are many reasons why we wanted to call it Fabula. Some of them came up already in retrospective. And it's interesting actually that some of the people that were involved in the company were people from the previous life, from Envision, from the Ernesto Schmidt, who was behind the acquisition of Envision by Intel, joined as the president of Fabula, and was instrumental in securing its acquisition by Twitter. So that's how I ended up at Twitter, together with my current and former students. So here you see our first day there in June last year. And this technology we are currently developing to make Twitter a safer, a healthier, and better social media platform. I should mention interesting applications from the domain of biology and medicine. So, well, this is probably now everybody is talking about the coronavirus. Here is an example of cancer immunotherapy. Basically, this is what is shown here is a protein complex, what is called programmed death ligand, PD-1, PD-L1 protein, so important that the study and the discovery of its function for immunotherapy was recognized by the Nobel Prize in Medicine 2 years ago. And basically, this is just one example of how proteins play important role in the design of drugs. Basically, proteins are literally molecules of life. They regulate and guide every important process in our body. And drugs are usually developed to bind to protein. Basically, it's usually a small molecule that attaches to a protein and changes something in the way that it interacts with other proteins. So basically, it enables or disables some chemical reactions. Now, how proteins bind is very poorly understood. You can simulate it. It is very expensive computationally. You can use, for example, molecular dynamics. So we developed a method with collaborators from Lausanne using geometric deep learning to try to predict whether proteins will interact with each other and how they will interact. And this appeared earlier this year on the cover of Nature Methods. So that's probably the first paper with geometric deep learning in the title in Nature class journal. And in general, these methods are now being employed for drug development.
Maybe can I just interrupt quickly for a question here?
Yeah.
Hi, Michael. So I was wondering on the protein folding side, so matching which proteins would bind. Could you say maybe a word or two of what this means for all of us on the medical side in terms of being able to get better medications faster, how it will help with development of all of these pharmaceutical components that we now need?
Absolutely. So that's actually what I wanted to show in my next slide. So basically, if you think of drug development and in general, any material development where you have some candidate that you want to find, for example, a drug that would be efficient against some pathogen, against the virus, the number of potential candidates, if you look at the number of molecules that you can synthesize in the lab, is humongous. It's probably more than the number of atoms in the universe. I think the modest estimate is 10 to the 60. So you cannot, of course, experimentally test all these candidates. It will be absolutely impossible. So you need somehow, there is a computational funnel. You need to restrict your search space of those molecules, those candidates that can be tested. You need to select promising candidates. And this is done by simulation. So you can do quantum mechanical simulations. You can test that many candidates. You can do some approximations. DFT is a common method that is used in this domain. So with graph neural networks, with geometric deep learning, that was a work that's already old. That was a work from DeepMind in 2017. You can do simulations that are as accurate as what is done in this domain, but about 3 to 5 orders of magnitude faster. And this is not just, computer scientists tend to be excited about biological problems and say, let's simulate something and that's all. And we move to the next problem. So actually, you can bring it to clinical application. And there was a very important paper in Cell earlier this year by a group from MIT, where they actually discovered a new class of antibiotics using these graph neural network, graph deep learning methods. So they use it, well, obviously as part of a bigger system of drug discovery that is based on graph neural networks for virtual screening of potential molecule candidates. So this is really exciting news. It's probably one of the first times that it's really used to produce a drug. There are other examples of maybe less exciting, maybe more mundane and boring, but for example, new materials like light-emitting diodes can be explored using these methods. So it's really probably beginning of, if not revolution, a very fast evolution in this domain of computational chemistry and drug discovery. And there is a lot of commercial interest in this domain as well. I should say that we also try to take it to a slightly different domain, basically looking at drug repositioning or drug repurposing, and basically looking at the way that the drugs or other molecules interact with each other and with our proteins. You can represent it as a very complex graph, right? So basically, for example, when we eat something, maybe we don't even think of it, but we ingest thousands of different molecules. And they interact with proteins in our body. They interact with bacteria in our gut. So it's very complex systems of interactions that it is very difficult to model, but we possibly can learn from examples. And what we try to do, we tried actually to discover what food-based molecules can be similar to drugs. In particular, we looked at oncological drugs, and we discovered, well, maybe not very surprisingly, that some foods have many molecules that are similar in the way that they act. They bind to proteins in our body to oncological drugs. So green tea, for example, is a very strong candidate. We call these champions containing many such molecules hyperfoods. And it's a very cool collaboration because it also has the creative, the gastronomical side. And we actually teamed up with a celebrity chef in the UK that is helping us to develop these foods that will be healthier and contain substances that might be also personalized and targeted against particular diseases. I should say now, obviously, with the COVID-19 epidemics, we are also looking at antivirals. So there is a big effort that is spearheaded by Mila in Canada that tries to find drug repositioning candidates, and in particular drug combinations against the coronavirus. So that's the kind of where this kind of technology can be used as well. So we are actively exploring it. Of course, once you identify such candidates, you need to test them at least in vitro and maybe clinically. So there is still a long way to go, but it looks very promising and very exciting. And here are some pictures of cool foods that actually contain these champion anti-cancer ingredients that were prepared by my wife, by the way. So I think I will stop here, and we'll be glad to answer any questions and maybe pass the stage to Alex, who also has other exciting things what we together and he alone has been up to.
Yeah, maybe I can interject here and just ask everyone to send us their questions on the text. Now is a good time to think about what the questions would be for Michael, and we'll go on in the meantime to hear from Alex. And yeah, please, Alex.
Thanks, Oscar. How much time do I have?
About 20 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So I will show. Let me just share my screen. So I will show some things that we did together, and some things that I also did myself. And I guess Michael will have some nostalgic feelings about this one image that I will show. So Michael didn't mention that after we finished our PhD, we actually went on an entrepreneurial adventure, our first adventure. We wanted to do something commercial with our face recognition, but we ended up doing video processing chips in a company that we co-founded with other partners called Novophora. And we basically we have been working on analyzing video. And one of the ideas that came up back then is that basically a video is just a sequence of some frames that can be represented, let's say, over a very big alphabet of characters. And if you want to find a piece of video that is similar to some query video, then it sounds remarkably similar to bioinformatics questions like finding a subsequence in a genetic or a protein sequence. And basically, we tried to think about a way to build a kind of a video genome, a representation, a bioinformatics like representation for videos, and also use sequence similarity, sequence matching algorithms to look for videos. And that was back in 2007. We tried to interest some big studios in these applications, and it was, I think, 1 or 2 years after Google acquired YouTube, and somehow nobody really cared about, especially user-generated videos. Basically, nobody thought that there would be a market for them. I think now the situation is a little bit different. So we went on actually building first prototypes of this kind of bioinformatics inspired video search engine. And Michael will probably have some nostalgic feelings about this photo that I found. This was our handmade little cluster on which we were sequencing the video genome, basically harvesting many videos from YouTube and creating these representations for the videos. And then eventually, with the help of amazing people, basically our partners, I would like to mention Eyal and Aviad and Zev, we basically created a company called Video Sites that I think nowadays services the biggest video search engine in the world. about 500 million videos in the database, which grows very fast. Also allows to search online content. So what you can see here, there is a, I think is it football? I think football video on YouTube. You can just paste this URL, and the search engine queries videos by video. So you have an example video, and you can discover actually many copies of this video across different platforms. It counts how many views your content had. It allows essentially to monetize and to trace visual content on the internet. I would like to mention another thing that is also related to computer vision and related to the medical domain. So maybe I will just start with a video. Can you hear the sound?
An elusive dream for over 140 million couples in the world who face fertility issues. For most,
Maybe you can make it a little bit louder.
is the only solution. In IVF, several eggs are fertilized and then monitored by an expert, the embryologist. Each of the candidates is assigned a score that reflects the viability to become a healthy baby. The best
Are you
embryo
sharing
is
the content?
selected and transferred back to the woman's womb. Despite the huge amount of data,
So we are still just seeing yourself, Alex.
assignment is
Sorry, say it again, please.
We're just seeing you. If you could somehow share the content and increase the sound.
Yeah, let me try again.
I was seeing Alex's content, yeah. So it's the sound is faint, but
Okay, let me try this way. Can you?
being a parent. An elusive dream
Yes,
for over
okay.
140 million couples in the world who face fertility issues. For most, IVF, in vitro fertilization, is the only solution. In IVF, several eggs are fertilized and then monitored by an expert, the embryologist. Each of the candidates is assigned a score that reflects the viability to become a healthy baby. The best embryo is selected and transferred back to the woman's womb. Despite the huge amount of data that exists on each embryo, the score assignment is based on a small set of parameters, while the major part of the available data is unused. Unfortunately, this method is inefficient, resource-heavy, and the average success rate is only 30%. If the process fails, it's back to the clinic to begin yet another exhausting, painful, and expensive IVF cycle. We at Embryonics introduce an exciting revolution, an artificial intelligence system that optimized the IVF journey. We implemented cutting-edge advances in machine learning that leverages enormous amounts of data, millions of IVF cycles around the globe. Using our novel algorithms, all the embryonic data, visual, clinical, and biochemical data is integrated to an holistic view of the embryological development. This allows us to detect subtle associations among the properties of each embryo, providing deep personalized analysis down to the chromosomal level. Our approach is singular. It handles heterogeneous data with temporal dimensions in a way that solves the major obstacles that are associated with applying AI in health applications. Therefore, we consistently achieve state-of-the-art results in embryo selection in terms of prediction ability of implantation success. Each year, over 5 million IVF cycles take place worldwide with an unremarkable success rate. Each cycle is invasive, painful, and costs tens of thousands of dollars. Our technology can make the dream of those couples come true. Embryonics, bringing new life wisely.
So basically, in this application that you saw in the video, the idea is very simple. The input is this sequence of microscopic photos of a developing blastocyte, what will become a human embryo, under the microscope in an incubator. And typically, let's say about a dozen of these is harvested from the patient, and then, of course, fertilized, and then the embryologist has to select which one to implant. And basically, we are developing, again, this is I'm not taking credit for this. This is the amazing work of Yael Gold, the superwoman CEO of Embryonics, and also David Silver and a few other colleagues. Most of them are actually fellow colleagues from Envision and then Intel. So basically, we developed an algorithm for grading embryos that performs significantly better than human embryologists. And here you can see it in this little plot. The name of the algorithm is not U-bar, it's U-bar. It's the Hebrew for embryo, so it's U-bar. And I would like to connecting to the topic of imaging and computer vision. I would like to show a little concept that I think can be taken to interesting technologies and conceptually new ideas in the world of imaging. I call it learning to see. So basically, if we look at how our brain has evolved in nature, our and mammalian brain in general, we see the world through pictures, and we communicate with pictures. This is probably one of the earliest drawings that dates back almost 40,000 years. We communicated stories with pictures. This is our way to see the world and to represent the world. And humans have been building imaging devices probably for many hundreds of years. And of course, it was the photographic process that made the image persistent and allowed us to communicate with pictures. And obviously, we have made a huge progress from the early camera obscura that probably existed even earlier than earlier than the 17th century to today's modern state-of-the-art cameras, which are really marvels of science and engineering. And actually, they completely changed the way we interact, our social habits. If you count the number of cameras in this audience, I bet it will be at least twice more than the number of people. So basically, I have a phone with for like five imaging sensors here, just in my phone. Mm-hmm. So
I just a quick interrupt here. You mentioned the social activities. We had one question from the audience. If sure. We can relate that to the current social distancing measures, do you think that the technologies you're working on could help us with social distancing?
Well, I guess you mean probably how to cope with social distancing. So
well, how to cope, enforce anything.
Well, so first of all, let me again give my very probably narrow perspective on that. But doing three-dimensional imaging and being able to create more realistic three-dimensional avatars of people, maybe also using augmented or virtual reality technologies, obviously brings remote people a little bit closer. I don't think, I'm not sure I want to live in a world where this is the only way we communicate with people, but probably in such extreme situations like the current COVID pandemic, it brings distant people slightly closer. I think this can be, I don't know, this can be definitely helpful.
Do you see any limitations? Maybe that's for both. What are the limitations that you see with AI and machine learning? Do you think anything is possible, or is there something that you believe will never be within the grasp of this exciting technology?
You mean in general?
In general, yes.
Well, I guess so. If you look what AI, I hate this term, but what machine learning, I don't know what AI is, but what machine learning technologies allow you to do today, they really allow you to excel in many decision-making processes and many inference processes. However, the versatility of the human brain, even I look at my children, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old children, their ability of inference, their ability to learn from a single example is probably light years from what the best algorithms allow today. Now, this is on the rational, the cognitive side, where I think today machine learning really made huge progress. If you go to the emotional side, so even with the most advanced, let's say chatbots, machine learning based chatbots, they more or less, they can barely imitate an autistic speaker, basically completely ignoring or being insensitive to emotions and sarcasm and irony and so on.
Right.
So basically trying to analyze emotions and trying to do some kind of emotive thinking or reasoning, I think this is very, very far, because it is probably much more difficult to model mathematically.
If I
Michael,
if I
any limitations of ML or AI?
Yeah, so same as Alex, actually. Well, sometimes we think in exactly the same words. I also think that AI is much of a business loaded buzzword. But basically, people, well, of course, people have been thinking of how to imitate human intelligence with an artificial creation, and somehow we thought that, well, what could be thought of as hallmarks of human intelligence? Playing games like chess or Go, right? Basically recognizing and analyzing the visual world, and understanding text and language, right? And maybe creativity. And here you go. Now in 2020, you can, with computers, at least to some extent, you can solve all of these, right? So chess is already beaten in the end of the 90s, right? That was IBM's work against Kasparov. Then DeepMind also won over the Go champion. So let's say we have solved the games. Then computer vision. Well, nowadays you have even self-driving cars that work reasonably well, at least in some situations.
Yes, but these are the things we can do. How about
right? So
the things you believe we will not be able to do?
Right. So what I'm saying is, and the creativity as well. We have computer art that looks interesting, and yet can we say that we have an artificial brain? Not even close, right? So it's a kind of a moving target. So we don't really understand what makes a human intelligent. Is it just a matter of?
We also have a question on how close. So if you had to give your best estimate, and of course it's a hard question, but you probably know more about this than most other people in the world. 10 years, 100 years, or 1,000 years?
I think
you're overestimating. You're overestimating. I think we are as clueless as the rest of the people in the world.
Yeah, it's basically it's an exponential growth in some sense with technology. So it's really hard to make any prediction. I think currently we have no clue actually how to make artificial intelligence in the sense of general artificial intelligence. There are some attempts, there are some directions, but we are not even close. So it might happen in a couple of years because of some breakthrough. It might happen. It might not happen in the next 50 years. So I think any estimate that I can make now is completely baseless. I think I don't know who can make such an estimate. I think impossible.
All right.
But at least, but maybe my little interjection here. So at least for, let's say, speaking of general intelligence in the cognitive sense, again, we at least can formulate mathematically or in some maybe vague and still not really clearly formulated terms what it means to make any inference. When we go to the domain of feelings and emotions, we don't even have any tool to deal with that. So basically, I think there we are really much farther away from any reasonable goal.
Okay, let's make it a little bit easier here. So general intelligence, thinking the way the brain works, very hard question. So you don't know. How about something simpler? When are we going to have a computer that can tell fake news from real news?
Well, Michael sold the company to Twitter on that. It's already a solved problem.
Yes, so I think, well, fake news, first of all, I think this is a really problematic question in general, because let's start with the concept itself. What is fake news, right? So if you go to the US now, and this is actually one of the things that we've seen in Fabula, is that you have two parallel universes that almost don't communicate to each other, that live with their own system of consistent facts that contradict, at least partially, each other. And there are people that believe in one set of things and people believe in another set of things. And what is true, what is fake? So there is even this term of post-truth world. So we use a certain definition. You can still verify certain facts or certain statements. But so first of all, it's the very difficulty of the concept itself. Then sometimes you can have a truth that is presented in such a way that is taken out of context and is misleading. So basically, this categorization into true or fake is much more nuanced. So it's a continuum rather than just a binary classification. Then, if you look at content, basically, it can be an image with wrong caption. It can be an image that was manipulated, the so-called deepfakes. It can be a text that is written in a certain way that implies certain things, but doesn't necessarily state it clearly. So you can often, unfortunately, see it in many media items that have a very provocative title, but then when you read it, it's actually not exactly what you guessed from the title. So it's really nuanced. I don't think that this is just a technological problem. I think it has to do with the trust in our media, in our institutions, in basically trust in each other. And I think now the pandemic actually discovers the depth and the severity of this phenomenon. We need probably start with educating ourselves. So we are talking about hygiene, washing our hands and wearing masks and not sneezing in public. So probably we should do the same thing for information when it comes to media, to content. Like we wash our hands, we should probably check the source of the piece of information that comes. Maybe think twice before we like it or retweet it or post it on Facebook. So some kind of maybe even common sense and critical thinking might, if not eradicate, but at least reduce dramatically the severity of this phenomenon.
So you're saying that we would need government guidelines on how to read news, in addition to computerized tools?
No, I don't think it should be government guidelines. I think it should be common sense and logic, and probably same way as we at school, children are taught to critically think. We should probably educate people to how to absorb and how to analyze and how to process information that we get from the media.
So maybe then the next question is, do we need to teach AI in high schools?
Definitely. Machine learning or data analysis techniques, I think this is absolutely crucial.
I would say, first of all, we need to teach algorithmic way of thinking and programming, coding, basically, from kindergarten, in my opinion, because these are things that can be taught as play. I just took advantage of this isolation, in this pandemic, to start teaching my 6-year-old son programming, and actually it works very well, and also to teach not the old paradigm of let's say an imperative language where you write a set of instructions and they're executed the way you wrote them, but actually the data-driven way of programming, which I believe this is the gateway to what not today is called AI, but basically this way of working with probably approximate concepts rather than
so that reminds me of Technion professor Dan Schechtman, who has been teaching science in elementary school or even kindergarten level on television in Israel. Is this a place where the Technion in Israel could take a leadership role in the world to drive how to educate toddlers on the new world of technology and how to bring them in to interact with it?
I think. Well, I don't know. I don't have an answer. I think this is, first of all, this is very difficult because I think Feynman was talking about it, that if you cannot explain it to a child, then you don't understand it yourself. And basically, when you need really to explain, probably some concepts cannot be explained. So if you take maybe complicated concepts in I don't know, in modern physics, probably it is.
Michael, I disagree. I explained to Daniel, my son, the ideas of general relativity and nuclear fusion when he was 5 years old. I think this can be explained. Of course, for every age there will be some appropriate level of abstraction.
Right. So you need to meet some deals. Yeah, I do it myself as well with my son. So it's. It probably really depends. I still think that certain depths and certain complexity cannot be explained. But first of all, it's very difficult. I think this is absolutely necessary exercise. I just think that many people somehow think, and many great researchers and great teachers actually think that this is somehow inferior to my level. Basically, I'm teaching I don't know, graduate students. I like to teach an advanced course, but who are these kindergarten people, little people that don't even know how to count? It is very difficult. It's also very rewarding because at this age, when basically somehow we at least I speaking for myself, I think we lose a little bit this excitement of the first discovery.
The joy of the first discovery.
We work in a field where, okay, of course, there is a lot of new things, but it is related and it's similar to what you've done before and what you've seen in the past. When you're a kid, everything is new. So this excitement, this genuine excitement, is something that is unique, and you need to capture it in I would say short span, maybe, I don't know, until the age of 7 or 8 or something like this, and it can really be very rewarding. So I think definitely the government, not only in Israel, probably everywhere, should invest in teaching kids science. And talking
maybe
yeah.
I can stop it here. This is the time I think we are expecting a speaker from the Israeli embassy, if I'm not wrong. Let's see if we get another picture in. So I think we'll just have to wait if that gets switched in. Yes, here we go.
Hi.
Please.
Yeah, so no, I was listening the whole time. It was very attentive, very interesting. I want to thank Oscar and Alan for inviting me to join, and I want to thank Alex and Michael for a very interesting presentation. I think that the current situation shows the importance of technology and importance of AI in preparation, in addressing critical situations, and in helping people cope with the current situation. Definitely a lot of technology and a lot of solutions that are out there that are based on AI and are helping people to overcome this the current situation. It definitely goes to show the importance of technology. I think that the connection that we have here with two brothers from Israel, from the Technion and in the UK, I think exemplifies the relationship that we have between Israel and the UK. I think we entered this current crisis in really a peak in the relationship between the UK and Israel in terms of trade and policy and diplomacy and social issues. And I think that the relationship that we have is going to be is going to overcome the current challenges that the current situation poses. And yes, again, thank you very much for the Technion for organizing this very interesting webinar. And thank you, Michael and Alex, for a very interesting presentation.
Thanks for the invitation.
So I have a few closing words. Just to say also thank you for everybody for dialing in. Thank you for joining us. And really looking back over the last decade and more, I've become more and more excited about what has been coming out of Israel, of the Technion. But this year has been a fantastic breakthrough. We really should all celebrate that Israel, in today's crisis with COVID-19, with everything that we've been experiencing, has been mentioned by many people as the #1 country in its response to a global pandemic. And that is something that I could not have imagined of the Israel that I first came to in 1974, and definitely not in the one that I was studying in 1994. So this is a fantastic current position, and I hope we are going to see a lot more in the near future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.